write them down on the paper slips that were provided earlier. Please provide your name and your neighborhood before you provide them to us. And for those who are joining virtually, you can email your questions to aoc.townhall@mail.house.gov or call 718-662-5970. If you need ASL service, please come by the front rows here. And for today's town hall, the Congresswoman will discuss recent ruling by Supreme Court and what they mean for you, highlight renewable energy projects coming online right here in New York 14, and make an announcement about the winner of our Congressional Art Competition for this year. We also have many of our environmental justice advocates right here, so please stop by their office, learn about the work that they do. We will then open up to Q&A for our constituents. The questions that you were offered, please include your name and neighborhood once again on the slips. Once completed, please hand them to my colleague Daisy. She's right here. And for non-constituents who are attending, please be mindful of the time and space we're creating for constituents to engage with their elected representative. We are joined this evening by representatives from New York State Governor Kathy Hochul's office, as well as District Attorney Darcy Clark's office. Thank you for joining us. We're also joined by Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson tonight. We are also joined by State Senator Louis Sepulveda representing New York's 37th. He's the chair of the Committee on Cities. I invite Senator Sepulveda to the stage for his remarks.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. So happy to be here. Of course, you're doing great work with the Congresswoman. I've been doing for a long time here. We used to share a lot of this, we don't share as much now. But I am still willing to follow the lead and all the great stuff she does in Congress, defending the people in this community, defending our rights, defending against the travesty that's the U.S. Supreme Court today and their decisions to remove things like things of money. Their destruction of affirmative action and no problem maintaining legacy appointments to universities, their destruction of our basic rights, their fight against the LGBT community, their fight against people of color, their fight to prevent us from voting, fight to prevent a fair system, and their unwavering support of one of the biggest criminals that this country's had in the last 100 years, Donald Trump. You can applaud. Now, I represent a smaller part of the district, but I do have some of it in Bronx and houses, or on the east Tremont side of the Cross-Bronx Expressway. I still have the honor of privilege to represent all of them. I believe the Congresswoman represents that district still, and there's nobody better to work with. There's no one who makes me more proud every day I work and I see either Reels or the Republican Party attacking her, or Fox News post. They attack her because she's effective, because she cares about the people in this community, and she will never waver in her support for all of you, regardless of special interest, and regardless of the fight that they take to her. And I want you to know, Congresswoman, and I want everyone here to know that I am one of your soldiers in these fights. God bless you.
Thank you, Senator Sepulveda, for your remarks. I now invite Congresswoman Nipa. Does everyone think Nipa is great district staff around? You can raise your hands as well for our district staff. They're the folks that are in the home and call. These are the folks that are in the thank you all so much. So Nipa kind of laid out a little bit today about what some of the topics that we want to go through today. This is our first physical town hall in Hunts Point since the new redistricting, and we're just so Hunts Point is a really special community to me. A lot of my family lives on Southern Boulevard, like literally just a stone's throw away. This building is the same building that I started community organizing out of right when I graduated college as well, and so it feels really, really good to have gotten Hunts Point back in redistricting for us to be organizing back out here again. So thank you all so much for coming out here today. I'm really excited. So some of the things that we do in our town halls is that because there's always so much to cover, we try to give a little bit of a theme to each town hall in terms of what we'll cover, so that month to month you'll get a deeper dive into each issue. But that doesn't mean that any question is off the table. If you have any questions about anything else at the end, feel free. Again, just write it down. We have slips of paper. You can just raise your hand if you need one. We do that in order to keep it orderly and efficient at the end. But as we mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the Supreme Court rulings that happened and some of the implications about that. Then, our theme that we want to do for this month's town hall is that we want to talk a little bit about some of the environmental justice and renewable energy projects that we're trying to bring throughout the district. It's really important stuff, but a lot of these projects sometimes aren't what is discussed in the news because it's kind of slow moving, but it's really important information for you all to have. And then lastly, we want to celebrate the winner of our Congressional Art Competition, who is here with her family, and we'll share with you all the art piece that she submitted, that one that is now hanging in the United States Capitol for the rest of the year. So we're very excited to share that. But let's jump in a little bit right away into some of these Supreme Court rulings. So we got 3 really bad Supreme Court rulings last week. The first was on affirmative action. The Supreme Court essentially struck down affirmative action last week. And this, of course, does have implications for our community. These are institutions that have historically excluded on the basis of race, gender, and identity. And affirmative action was a program that was meant to make up for the harm of that and legacy of the history of discrimination in these institutions. The Supreme Court struck that down, but I do think it's important to and one of the things that we immediately said was affirmative action solely on the basis of race was what was overturned. But affirmative action for wealth and privilege, if your parents attended college or if your parents gave money to a school, that was untouched. Affirmative action based on geography was untouched. Affirmative action based on virtually any other factor was left untouched. The Supreme Court solely said that race and a person's racial identity is the only thing that's not allowed to be considered in the broad mix of developing an admissions process. And so, that's one of the first things that we said, is that legacy admissions is inherently unjust and unfair. And in fact, in terms of a response, what we're already seeing is some folks already starting to mount legal cases against legacy admissions in some of these institutions. So we will be keeping a close eye on that in terms of how that proceeds. The second thing that we saw very devastatingly was allowing, and this case was just ridiculous, was allowing for certain kinds of discrimination against LGBT people. What was so ridiculous about this case was that it was completely made up. The individual held was like a website designer, and she wanted the right to decline. She wanted the right to and the ability to decline or discriminate against a client because of their LGBT identity. The truth of it is, though, is that the person that she identified
was not gay, had no idea that he was even being named in the case. He is married to a woman, they have children. It was completely fabricated. And the Supreme Court took this up anyway, and they allowed for the ability to discriminate. And so, our hope is that this case hopefully may experience again some other challenges and other forums, but these are very dangerous mounting rollbacks of our basic civil liberties that we are experiencing at the hands of the Supreme Court. Last year, we saw the rollback of the Dobbs, in the Dobbs decision, of people's ability to have bodily autonomy. And what's very important in the overturning of Dobbs is that we're not just talking about abortion rights, but we're talking about our privacy rights overall as well. And that is of deep, deep concern to us all. But even more concerning on top of that is that, and we'll get to the student debt relief as well, is that we are learning in the weeks before these decisions are coming down that these Supreme Court justices have been receiving financial benefits from billionaire benefactors with interest and cases before the Supreme Court. And that is something that we have to put a stop to right now. We need to put a stop to it yesterday and the day before that. Congressional investigations into the Supreme Court and into this unethical activity. The Senate asked Chief Justice Roberts to come before and testify before the Senate regarding these deeply disturbing revelations, and the Chief Justice said no, refused to come before Congress to answer questions about this. If they refuse to come up, then I believe they should submit a subpoena in order to including a Supreme Court justice, period. And so that's our story and we're sticking to it. The last ruling that I want to kind of discuss with you all is the ruling around student debt relief, because what I want to make sure that we understand as a community is that from reading the headlines, we would think, student loan debt relief, it's over, it's dead in the water, we're not going to get it. And so I want to communicate how important it is to say that is not true. We are going to fight for student loan debt relief. We have a backup plan. There are some times in this work where, as much as there are things that we want to communicate everything publicly in real time, sometimes due to the sensitivity around situations, we're not always able to. But I can share with you all now that even in the weeks and days leading up to the ruling, I and several other members of the House of Representatives were in the White House negotiating with the Biden administration about a Plan B. We were very, very adamant in saying if the court overturns this, we want to make sure that we don't take no for an answer and that we identify every alternative route. And that route will be ready to go on day one within hours of the ruling coming down. I'm very happy to say that we made some steps along that. If some of you may have been following, within hours of the ruling coming down, President Biden stuck to his word and he committed to pursuing a Plan B on student loan forgiveness. Now, of course, there are some differences between what we would have proposed and what he implemented, but the fact of the matter is that the most important part was that commitment to implementing a Plan B. And so I want to communicate with you all about what this is going to look like so far, and also some of what we're continuing to push on the administration to implement. So, from the big debt limit fight you all may have been hearing in the news, where Republicans held the entire U.S. economy hostage in exchange for a whole bunch of things that even they couldn't identify, to be honest. One of those things was that they forced a restarting of the student loan payments around September 1st. So that was kind of baked in already from the debt limit deal that Republicans had forced. So what is going to happen is that, yes, begin on September 1st. However, part of what we're doing here is that what was struck down by the Supreme Court was not what President Biden did specifically, but how he did it. He implemented student loan forgiveness through a program known as, a legislation known as the HEROES Act, which was during the pandemic. We have been pushing on him to use the Higher Education Act in order to forgive the student loan forgiveness. So we always felt like that should have been plan A, but then that makes it an even better plan B, because that's what we wanted to do the whole entire time. And so we're going to use the Higher Education Act, but that's going to take some time to come online. So what President Biden is doing is that he's implementing a 12-month on-ramp period. So these payments technically start on September 1st, but if you miss a payment, it will not go to a credit reporting agency. Your credit will not be dinged if you miss a student loan payment. Your credit will not be dinged if you're late. Nothing will happen in that department if you miss a student loan payment in the next 12 months. However, what will happen, and this is the part that we're kind of pushing back on the Biden administration on, is that interest will start to accrue on September 1st. And so what we are proposing is to freeze interest and maintain 0% interest on student loans for the next 12 months, at least. But we'll start there. And so that's one of the big major pieces. Now I just want to zoom out a little bit because some people very rightfully bring up the point of, well, what happens when we wipe this debt and people still need to take out these huge loans to go to college? And I just want to make sure that we're looking at this in the bigger picture. Because in the bigger picture, what we should be doing is wiping out student loan debt and implementing tuition-free public colleges and universities so that people don't have to go to That is how we actually solve this problem once and for all. And if you want to, if we have tuition-free public colleges and universities, which we once had, by the way, if we have that, then the option to attend a private university and take on that debt, that's a separate option. But everybody should have the ability to pursue higher education free of cost in order to maintain competitiveness in today's economy. Period. So I want to make sure that we explain what that plan B looks like. Again, we are continuing to push the Biden administration. He put in, they're saying 12 months. We really want them to ramp that up faster than 12 months. They're saying, interest will accrue. We really want them to also wipe out that interest during that period, especially because if you are eligible for student loan forgiveness, which is many, many people in our community, by the way, you shouldn't be paying interest on debt that's going to get forgiven anyway. And so, you should be paying interest, period, but especially in those cases, I think it's really important that people don't get kind of shortchanged in that way. The other thing with respect to student loans is that income-based repayment program, the income-based repayment program is changing. It's changing for the better. So it used to be the case that 10% of your discretionary income had to go to that income-based repayment if you have that kind of student loan payment structure. That 10% has now been cut in half to 5%. And so that's going to be a big thing. And also, it's not considered for repayment. And that also means that if you're making $15 an hour, you will not need to make monthly payments at all under income-based repayment. So in addition to that, it decreases the repayment sunset period for borrowers with loans of less than $12,000 from 20 years to 10 years, which means that if you are a borrower with a loan balance, it will be forgiven after 10 years on each individual loan under $12,000. So those are some of the important changes and updates that were announced in the last 1 to 2 weeks since the ruling. And we really wanted to make sure that you all had that information. So after the rulings, I just want to run through some of the latest projects and sustainability projects that we're trying to bring here to the Bronx and throughout the rest of the district in Queens as well. So renewable energy projects that we've been working on. I usually move a lot more during town halls, but I can't because we've got a live stream here and I need folks tuning in from home to be able to listen. But you can see all of these different projects that we've been working on. And I want to reiterate that renewable energy projects and bringing these projects to the community, it's really important, yes, economically. It's really important for us in saving money on our electric bills. It's really important for us in creating good, union, high-paying jobs right here in the Bronx. But it is also especially important for our environmental justice issues that we face here. In the South Bronx, we have some of the highest childhood asthma rates in the world. And so that childhood asthma and all of these sky-high asthma conditions and other respiratory issues is because of fossil fuels. It's because of fossil fuels. It's because the Cross Bronx Expressway has so much diesel trucking and all of this brought in through, and that dates back to the years and times of Robert Moses and the way that he designed this area. It goes back to the era when the Bronx was burning. We also have tons of issues with construction, with old buildings that haven't been maintained, and so there's off-gassing that are happening there. And so us bringing in this renewable infrastructure is not just economic and planetary, but it's to save our lungs, it's to save our kids, it's to restore our health and add years to our lives and quality of the years to our lives. And so this is very multidimensional, and it's one of the reasons why we wanted to get to work on this right away, because this is going to have some immediate turnarounds, and we're also going to save money on our medical bills down the line as well. So just very quickly, we want to run through what some of these projects we've been supporting. The first is Capping Across Bronx, which we are really, really excited about. And let's do it. Love the Bronx and Milka, take a look back at some of the folks who are waving their hands. If you are interested, these are some of the most audacious organizers I have met in the Bronx, period. Like, incredible work. If you are interested in joining the coalition for Capping Across Bronx, definitely talk to Milka back there in the back. She's wearing the Loving the Bronx shirt, I believe. But there's so many other projects that we will soon discuss as well. But the whole premise of Capping Across Bronx is that one of the big reasons that we face so many respiratory issues in the Bronx is because of the Cross Bronx Expressway. And the proposal in Capping Across Bronx is to take the below-level areas of the Cross Bronx, the parts that kind of, you ever, driven or taken a cab or whatever in the Cross Bronx, the areas that you have like these two big walls on either side of you, those are usually the below grade level. The idea is to actually cap that area with green space. Because what often happens is that all of that trucking, all of those emissions, all of that, it permeates up. And there's so many residential areas that gas and that all of that emissions go off into. So it's a major contributor to respiratory issues in the Bronx. So the proposal is to add green spaces over those below grade areas. And those green spaces will not only reduce our respiratory issues, but also added green spaces increases public safety. It adds to personal and individual health outcomes. And it really is a justice issue as well. We know from so many different perspectives and studies that access to green space is a major indicator for, again, health, safety, and many other issues as well. And so we need more parks in the Bronx. We can always use more green space in the Bronx. And so we have been starting the long process. This is a very big, audacious project. But we have started the process of raising the possibility of this federally. We are working alongside our other Bronx representatives, Adriana Espaillat, Luigi Torres, etc., and trying to make sure that we make this a reality. So we're very excited about that happening across Bronx. Another project that we've been working on is some of the Hunts Point redevelopment. We have the biggest produce market, public-private produce market in the world here in Hunts Point. And this has been a source of a lot of the respiratory issues as well. We have all of this diesel trucking coming in, and it's to provide all of the produce that basically feeds New York City. And so what we have done is that we worked with Secretary Buttigieg and in support for a $110 million U.S. Department of Transportation grant in order to electrify all those diesel trucks. And so what we want to do is install industrial chargers for those big trucks because this technology is developing. And so what we want to do is that instead of being in a reactive place, we want to be in a proactive place. We are starting to invest in infrastructure that does not exist today, but will exist in the next 5 to 10 years. So that when it rolls out, we will not be the last to get it, we will be the first to get it. And that's what we're doing here. And so we're really looking at that. That is $110 million that we're bringing right here to Hunts Point. And a lot of that investment is also going to be partnered with and guided by not just elected officials, but grassroots and community organizations to make sure that investment is going to the right places as well. Speaking of some of that, getting ahead of infrastructure as well, our next project that we've been working on that is actually going online this summer is at SUNY Maritime in Bronx Neck. We have helped, we've worked with the local SUNY Maritime College in order to create an offshore wind training program. And what this is going to do is that what we are starting to see is that we're developing offshore wind in New York and across all of the East Coast. But this is very technical and technically advanced kind of construction and building trades and more kinds of skill sets. So with offshore wind, you need to not only be an electrician, like a really good electrician, but you also now need our electricians to be able to scuba dive. Because you're building these offshore wind turbines and they have to be built on pylons, like these big cement things underwater that you then put a turbine on top, and then you have to wire that back to the cities in order to get the electricity delivered to homes that they need. And so with very technically advanced skills, that means really, really high-paying jobs. And so again, one thing that we did was that we worked with our public college right here in the Bronx to start developing an offshore wind training program to help people train in developing those specific skill sets. And we were working with them in order to bring that online, and now it goes online this summer. And so we're very excited about that. That's about $800,000 in creating a public educational program. And what's even better is that we've also been supporting New York offshore wind. So once again, we're building that infrastructure, that jobs infrastructure, so that people in the Bronx are able to have access to that jobs training first instead of last. And so we're trying to attract investment and training in really high-skilled, union-track, dignified jobs as well. And so that goes on in the summer. That we just started working on is working with the EPA around the Cass-Gilbert station, which Loving the Bronx and Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice have also been doing a lot of development work around. And so some of you may recognize the Cass-Gilbert station in the Bronx. It's not too far from here. And it's like this gorgeous old station, but you can tell that it's been abandoned. And we drive past it all the time. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? I'm hearing people, because it's so beautiful, but also like no one's been using it for years. And it's always this question of what is this? And so we've been working with grassroots organizations in conjunction with the EPA, because the issue is that it's something known as a brownfield site. There's a lot of waste that could potentially be harmful without it being cleaned up. And so we want to turn that into public space that everyday people can enjoy. And so we've been working with the EPA to try to get a grant to our community organizations to pursue that cleanup so that we can lay the foundation for that use. Additionally, this also intersects with the Amtrak stations that are coming into the community. And so people would be able to have a place to spend time, etc., before they got on the train to go to Manhattan. say, and come back. And the stations as well are so important because these are going to cut down our commutes by up to 60 minutes. 60 minutes. And so our fight with that right now is to make sure that we get those online, that they're dignified, but that also that we protect people's access to housing around that as well. Because we don't want that to then mean that these are the next areas that are going to be gentrified for displacement. These are being built for us, and we should be the maybe we can go back to that map a little bit. Up there at the very, very top, that's Co-op City. Due to some of the investments from the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill, we are working with Co-op City because Co-op City, I don't know, has their own power plant. And it's remarkable. And they not only develop their own energy, but they actually sometimes, when they overdevelop energy, they lease it, they sell that energy back to the city. So they actually power our local public schools and other public institutions as well. And so we're working to see if we can use some of those federal dollars to introduce more renewable energy development at Co-op City to make everyone healthier. Right underneath that is something known as organization 9 created community-scale Bronx battery storage, which is really important because it can help us stave off power outages and more. And so we are working on expanding that battery storage site so that more people can have more power stability, especially during the summertime. We've got, let's see, Con Ed. We've got reliable, on the Queens side, we're working on Con Ed just finished building a 6-mile-long transmission line in Queens to carry increasingly renewable energy as well, which will help us retire inefficient and polluting power plants in the area, particularly peaker plants. And lastly, with Hunts Point electric charging stations, the Point CDC, along with local partners, won a $10 million award from New York CERTA to establish the Electric Truckers Cooperative, which will allow for the creation of a refrigerated battery electric fleet. So we are working to clean up this air really fast, as soon as possible, and there's going to be a lot of changes happening. And then lastly, we're very, very excited we want to show off our talent in our community. So every year there is a Congressional Art Competition that occurs. And each year we get several submissions that come in. We get many submissions from folks to be able to win that competition. Winning that competition is a very high honor. Your work of art gets hung up in the United States Capitol for an entire year. You are invited down to Washington. It is wonderful for our kids and for our students who are applying to competitive colleges and universities. And this year's winner is Priska Boadu, and this is her work right up here. And I'd like to introduce you. Bronx community and all of the families that make it up. And so we're just so proud of Priska. She came down to the Capitol. Her mother is here as well. I'm so proud to be able to welcome them to the Capitol. And if any of you happen to be, making a visit to Washington, you can go to the House of Representatives representatives, you will see this work in person again. So with that, I think we're ready for our Q&A portion. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Congresswoman. So we will move on to the Q&A portion now. I will read out the names of the constituents who have the questions, and my colleague will come over to you with the microphone. Okay, so we have Maria Torres.
I didn't expect that. I thought I was off tonight. Okay, so I had a question. Thank you again. I'm very excited for the first town hall here. My question has to do with housing and AMIs and HUD. So I said, what can you do to get HUD to change how AMIs are calculated so that lower income neighbors are better reflected and represented and affordable housing is really made affordable to places like Hunts Point? Because unfortunately, we're lumped in with Westchester incomes, and so when you get affordable housing here, it's never really at the rate it should be. So just
Thank you, thank you. You know, this is such a crucial question that that comes up often as well. For folks who may not know, you know, sometimes when you see these affordable housing, quote unquote, affordable housing, that comes up and you're like, oh, it's affordable for incomes up to $150,000. And we're like, what? And that is often due to something known as the AMI, the Area Median Income. And what gets designated as affordable by HUD is based on this formula known as an Area Median Income. And basically they say, okay, we can designate something as affordable based on the average of the incomes in that area. The problem is that it's very wide. And so that area goes all the way up, as Maria had mentioned. It's this big circle that goes as high as Westchester and as low as downtown Manhattan. And so if you take all of that and the area median income, it ends up being way higher than what our actual neighborhood is. And so we've been very supportive of trying to shrink the zone of what is designated as the area median income. That is very, very, very hard to do in the House and to build support for enough. We have been working with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on that in the past. But in the meantime, while we work on that federally, and while we also work with HUD on that federally, what we also can fight for is that when these projects are proposed, that we fight for a percentage of the area median income. So instead of saying, okay, these units can all be at 100% AMI, we should fight for there being a larger portion of those units being at 50% of AMI, which may get us closer to what the actual neighborhood income is. But this is a very major issue because one of the reasons why developers do this is because there's a tax incentive for that AMI. And so you can set that affordability really high, you almost get the rent that you would charge market rate for some of them. But you're not actually helping the people that really need housing the most. And so we've been really supportive of work to reform and change the AMI formula because, you know, that level of that widening area is fine if you're in a more rural area or even if you're in a more suburban area where things don't fluctuate as much. But we also live in a community where one of the lowest income zip codes is 15-minute subway rides and one of the highest income zip codes in America. And so when you have the South Bronx right there next to the Upper East Side, we have to make sure that we lower that radius to reflect the communities that we live in. So we're working, we've been fighting hard to reduce that AMI, but we also want to make sure that we can implement city-level solutions right away while we work on that federally as well. Thank you. Thank you, Maria.
Next, we have Maxine Regan Captions. Sorry.
My pleasure.
Thank
development and discovered during January of 2019 through March 31st of 2022, $31.3 billion was mismanaged. As a result of that, 20% of our maintenance, 20%, we faced with 20% maintenance increase, which we felt was unfair. So what we did was we filed for meniscus conditions through DHCR, asking for a rent reduction because the place is actually falling apart. And this is all reflected in that way. Now, what I would like to know is what we're going to do to hold these individuals responsible for pilfering that money. Because as a result, it's falling on the back of my shareholders. Me, myself, my rent was increased by $300. That's a matter of me paying my car note or surrendering my car. I surrendered my car. I gotta have a roof over my head. And then my second question is, we also had the water test in Jacob Towers. I took Jacob Towers to court for the water, and I actually won a decision. But what did I really win? The water is still very much brown. In order for me to take a bath in my home, I have to put a baby wipe over the bathtub. So when you speak about environmental, I have it right in my house. I cannot use the water to cook with. I can't brush my teeth with it. If I take a bath with it, I pretty much got to get out real fast because my skin is dry. I got a standard prescription for hydrocortisone. So what I would like to see is the government hold Jacob Towers' feet to the fire and make them clean up the water.
Thank you for bringing that up. No, of course, we're happy to dive in.
This is what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, it's unacceptable. No one should ever live out of those conditions and putting, baby wipes over faucets. And this is what is making our community sick. We talk about a lot of building and construction. It includes that. When we talk about environmental justice, a lot of times environmentalism is thought about hugging trees and saving polar bears and, out in the wilderness. And conservation work is important, but environmental justice, the way it shows up in our community is in the water that we drink and the air that we breathe and our right to not be poisoned by special interests. And also, by public institutions that withhold information. So I'm happy to take a look at this and see what next steps we are able to support of. Thank you. And of course.
Hi, my name is Shravan and I'm an assistant professor at Congresswoman College. I'm a big supporter of you, though this is the first time I'm seeing you. Sure. So I'm a big supporter of you. I voted for you, but this is the first time I'm seeing you in person, so I'm very excited. I didn't have much of a question, but since I saw you, so I have to ask you a question. Nowadays, a lot of companies, especially the tech companies, they are laying off a lot of employees. Almost for no reason, they are panicking out of the economy, laying off. This doesn't make a situation better, it worsens the situation. In United States, laying off somebody is very easy. It's not that easy in European countries. They have a lot of protection from their government, by the law. Is there anything that Congress or you as a congressperson do to make sure these big companies who have billions of dollars and we give them billions of dollars of tax cut, still they are laying off people that impacts our community, their livelihoods, their families, everything. Is there anything congressperson, you or Congress as a whole can do to make these companies accountable so they can not just lay off if they want to? Like discuss about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think this issue oftentimes is kind of like has labor similarities to actual inflation, which is that there are a lot of companies that are making things harder for working people, not because they need to, but because they can. For example, with inflation and rising prices, we are seeing that, you go to the grocery store now, and it's like $100 buys like 4 things. It's crazy. And when we dig into this, we see that it's actually, they blame That's really just what it is. They're charging more because they think they can charge more, and they want they want to squeeze people more for their shareholders. And when we see with these mass layoffs, it's also very similar. There aren't really conditions that we see out there that really explain why these companies are justified in laying off all these people in the sector, but they are. And so, on the federal level, labor law, part of it, there's a couple of things at play. One of these things is that there's an antitrust issue at the core of this. When you have a big company like Facebook that owns Facebook and Instagram, and now they have this new Twitter platform that's coming out, what they're able to do is monopolize that market, and they have way more control over the skill and the talent in that market as well. And so I think antitrust is a part of this conversation. Some of these companies are too big, and they do need to be broken up. And creating issues in our democracy. It's also creating issues in our economy as well. We see this. There are a lot of these big companies that when they propose a merger or when they want to get bigger, they'll say, oh, this is very good for people, this is very good for jobs. It actually reduces the amount of jobs. And it creates a lot of other kinds of issues, and lots of people get laid off very often after a merger. And so, part of this is an antitrust issue. We do need to do a lot more in expanding labor rights federally. Absolutely. Whether it's the right to unionize, whether it's passing the PRO Act in the House and the Senate, as well as many other areas for expanding labor. But I do also want to say, I always try to pair what we're working on with this issue with also creating awareness about what rights you are available to right now. In the state of New York, we have a law on the books that says if you are a company that employs, if you are a large company that employs beyond a certain amount of people, you have to give notice, public notice, before if you are planning layoffs, I believe 3 months. And what a lot of these companies do is that they'll post it, but they keep it really, really quiet. And so you often don't know where to go, where to look. And, you might show up to work one day and, I hope this doesn't happen to anyone here, but a person could show up one day and get laid off and it takes them by surprise, but actually their company posted 3 months ago that they were going to do that. And so you should know your rights here in the state of New York. If you work for a company that is in the eligible size and they don't post it, you are eligible for recourse as well. So it's very important that you look up if your company followed the law on that. And if they didn't, then you may have certain recourse available to you. So those are companies that are based in New York and California as well. And so that covers a lot of tech companies. And in fact, that was one of the things that we saw potentially with Twitter, right? When Elon Musk said, oh, we're going to lay off all these people, we had to say, hey, was this posted? And if it wasn't, then we were in violation of labor law. And so there are a lot of federal laws that we're pushing to protect people, but even in the absence of that, because we have a Republican majority in the House, our state laws are strong, especially in the state of New York and in the state of California, where a lot of these companies are located, and they also have to adhere to that as well. So I just want to make sure you know your rights in that respect too. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. So, mi pregunta es, what is that activities that the question is, what will be your initiative? Which one are you pursuing to help small businesses in our community?
So, in terms of small businesses in our community, there's so much to be done. I know a lot of people may say COVID is over. It's not over. COVID is not over. It's not over health-wise, and it's not over economically as well. A lot of our small businesses still are contending with so many of the challenges from COVID and shutdowns and back rents and all of this. And so there's a couple of different things. One thing that we're actually starting to do, this is an area where we're actively starting to build out more, is that we want to create we're working on creating a fuller list of small businesses to be able to get direct outreach from our office. And so I believe that's a project that you'll be, if you all aren't signed on to our newsletter, please sign on to it because we will be sending out information around that. Because a lot of times we will get information from the Small Business Administration and we need to disseminate that information very quickly. And so making sure that you all are connected to our office is really, really important. During COVID, we fought very, very hard for PPP loans. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the chairwoman, or was the chairwoman of the Small Business Committee, but now she's the ranking member because the Republicans chair the committees now with the majority. And so we were able to help offer some of that PPP language. And, you know, that first round, we really fought against those inequities because, you know, like really well-connected and wealthier businesses were able to access those PPP loans first. And so we fought really hard to reverse that and to get our communities first at the table. There are so many grants, and we've kind of discussed this before. There are so many grants that are available to our small businesses. I don't think Daniel is here. Daniel's not here, but Daniel in our office, he runs grant workshops all the time. And we are more than happy to get that information out to you all in terms of what grants we can connect our community to. It's very, you know, there is so much out there, and it's really important for us that we connect our community directly to those opportunities because it's like a maze, right? But there's so many contracts. A lot of people don't know how that the federal government contractors make up an enormous amount of our economy. Small businesses that contract with the federal government make up billions and billions of dollars. It's a shockingly high amount. And so our communities should be connected to that. Our low-income entrepreneurs, minority and women-owned businesses, all sorts of folks, underserved communities. And so we have a lot of resources and links to share with you all around that. And whenever we get kind of breaking information, we try to also disseminate that to our community as well. Like when PPP loans first came out, like that night or the next night that the application went online, while all of like the more privileged businesses were getting that information kind of straight from their really high-level banking associates, we were also making the information public as well. So we want to make sure that we develop those pipelines and make sure you all are signed up to our newsletter because we share a lot of that information there. Thank you.
Cindy Schubert.
Cindy Schubert.
Still haven't got it. She's supposed to travel on Saturday. Why does it take so long?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this up. Passports are now, so when we have our casework, you know, all of the things that people contact our office about, passports used to be a very small sliver of that. It now makes up about 30 to 40% of all of our cases. You know, the need around passports has just exploded, but we have been able to help some folks around passports, and sometimes we're able to do it quickly. Now, the first thing I'll say, just as a PSA to everybody, the passport backlog is very long right now. It's about 3 months. There has been an explosion in travel, and a lot of people during COVID, obviously they weren't checking their passports, and so a lot of people's passports expired and such during COVID, and so there's been like this explosion in applications. But if you applied in February, then your passport is due. And so we'd be happy to have our district office, you know, some of our folks reach out to you. Pardon?
What's your office last name?
Okay. So then I'll make sure that we follow up, and I'll make sure that we resolve it. But I will say it is a mess right now. Even our office has been having trouble getting through to the New York Passport Agency. We've been trying really, really hard. It used to be we could intervene in 3 situations. 1, if your passport application was overdue, or 2, if there was like a life or death emergency. But it's been getting harder and harder because of the crush on applications. So given the urgency of your travel, we'll try to make sure we get that squared away. We have had success in some cases, but this week in particular has been really, really difficult. But if I could urge everyone to just do one thing when they get home, is to go home, and if you have a passport, open it and see the expiration date. Please don't wait until you're looking to view a trip or anything like that, because the timelines are really long. So if your passport is expiring in the next year, just send out that application now, and then you'll have it for years to come. But then secondly, if you don't have a passport, take this as a moment to just apply for one anyway. You never know when you might need one, and you don't want to wait until you need one in order to get it. But that being said, if you apply for it and you're given a processing time, that processing time should be honored. And we always try to make sure to interfere or rather intervene in cases where people's applications aren't moving the way that they should. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here. My question is, speaking about profiteering, companies profiteering. The other side of that is the party going to make raising the minimum wage a priority? Should you take back the House and keep the Senate in 24? Basically because prices may be high, but wages across the board are depressed.
Yeah.
And that's where we struggle really is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, raising the minimum wage has long been on the platform. Here's what I think we need, though, is that it has been 15 an hour, or like the demand here has been 15 an hour for like 11 years. We're past that now. I think we're now at the stage where 15 an hour now is the 7 an hour that it was back when people were first starting demanding 15. So I think we need to raise that commitment personally. It has been part of the agenda. Now, I think this is the frustration that we have. $15 minimum wage passed the House. It is the United States Senate that's blocking it. And it is also Democrats in the United States Senate. So I'm not here to just finger point at Republicans all day. There are Democrats that voted against including the $15 minimum wage in the American Rescue Plan. And we all have those, when people got those checks and we got, child tax credits and all that, that same bill, we had proposed to include raising the minimum wage in that. And there were, I think, maybe a dozen Democrats, I could have the number wrong, in the United States Senate that voted to delay that and put that off. And so what we really need to do is push on Democrats in the Senate in making sure that we raise the wage. This is like a life or death issue at this point. I mean, like we're saying, people are choosing between medicine and food and baby formula. This is not a way to live. Not in this country and not in the United States. Not when the wealthiest people in this country are experiencing more wealth. I mean, CEO compensation has actually reached obscene levels. We have never seen something like this in American history. The level of CEO compensation to worker compensation. It's just wrong. I'm sorry, but it's I don't know how some people sleep at night wrong. It's not okay to put people in this position. And so, yes, it's part of the platform, but we need to make sure that we push every Democrat in the Senate on this, because we actually had House Democrats behind us that passed the House. We need House Democrats on this. Our Democrats here in New York were both supportive of it, Senator Schumer and Jill Graham. I mean, this is New York. I don't think this is New York. I don't know if we can get away with not supporting that, right? But it's really important that we build support for that, and frankly, I do. And also, it needs to be indexed to cost of living. We can't be doing this every, all the time, constantly, putting people into this position. So, so I think a minimum wage is good, is really, really important. Raising it is important. I think it needs to be even higher than the 15 that has been put out there, because it's just becoming really unsustainable for a lot of people at this point.
Denise Rodriguez.
Hola, linda. Hola. Te quiero mucho. Okay, so my question is, where's my paper? Anyway, I'll read it off the top of my head. Considering that the Supreme Court has been corrupted by dark money or dirty money, is it really possible to expand the Supreme Court? Is that really, really possible?
So I think this is an excellent question. I'm going to answer in there's like two ways. There's like the political considerations, but then there's also the actual mechanism of how you could even do that. In terms of the mechanism, the Supreme Court does not control how big it is, how many seats there are. And for clarification, one of the principles behind, one of the proposals behind expanding the court would be for there to be one justice for each one of the district circuit courts. Right now, there's only 9 justices for, I believe, 13 district circuit courts. But regardless, one of the proposals is for there to be more justices. So what I will say is that it is not up to the Supreme Court as to whether we expand the court or not. That's not within their power. That power lies solely within the presidency and within Congress that would approve those expanded seats. Now, so is it possible? Yes, it's possible to do that independently of the court. Now, politically, that's our problem, right? Is that President Biden has indicated that he is not interested in court expansion. And also, we have a Senate that is very tight, that's not interested in eliminating the filibuster, which also kind of adds contention to the issue as well. So, what I will say is that our position is that the court should be expanded. Politically, though, we don't really have an avenue before us. So, the question then becomes, what else do we do? And here's what I think we should do. I mentioned earlier about the court being held accountable. I believe it shouldn't be like this. We want to have a court where the justices are not politicized, but the fact of the matter is we have a Supreme Court where the Republican majority is a highly politicized court. Clarence Thomas is a political actor. Justice Alito is a political actor. I don't see how you go on vacation and accept gifts from billionaires with business before the court and rule in their favor and think that you are above being named a political actor. That is what political actors do. And what they do political actors respond to consequences. I think we saw that last year. I think we've actually seen that the political blowback from overturning Dobbs was so swift from the public, from you all, and it was so intense that I actually do believe that the court was more restrained this session than it otherwise would have been. And I want to give 2 examples. We covered some of the bad rulings, but there are actually rulings that went in our favor that we did not anticipate. For example, there was gerrymandering, I believe in Alabama, that was overturned by the Supreme Court, and they're being mandated to reconstitute Black voting rights districts that were stripped in Germany. There were also several other cases that slightly went our way, and I believe that is because of the political consequences from the mass public after Dobbs. To say that they are not feeling that, I don't think is accurate. I think that they made a calculation, and they kind of kept their powder dry, if you will, on all the other rulings so that they could just deliver those three. So what does that mean? I think our alternatives would be I think that underscores the need for subpoenas and full-throated investigations. You know, Democrats may not have the House, but Democrats do have the Senate. And we should be using our investigatory powers and our gavels to explore and investigate actual evidence of misconduct, right? This isn't like this whole Republican make up a controversy bill. There is very real evidence of wrongdoing here. And I do believe that we should be issuing subpoenas because that is a consequence. That is a consequence. The more there are consequences for this behavior, the more that there is blowback, the more that there's actual material accountability, the more they will think twice before stripping people's rights away after taking money from people who are invested in that case. The right is going to do what the right is going to do, but Democrats sometimes need to grow a little bit more of a spine in order to issue consequences for this behavior. So while I am disappointed in President Biden's conclusion around expanding the court, that does not close all of our options here. And we have to make sure that we do that, which, by the way, also means keeping impeachment on the table for justices who were theirs that were James Perot. James.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I was a big fan, so great to see you. I was just wondering about the current ruling in regards to the website designer and how she denied same-sex couples. Sorry. I know New York City has some of the most robust anti-LGBTQ discrimination laws in the country. If this ruling will affect those laws that are in place and what the federal government can do to help enshrine those protections for LGBTQ.
Absolutely, thank you so much. So the first answer to your question is no. This ruling will not affect New York City's laws and it does not affect New York City or state's protections for our LGBT community. And that is why we have those laws in place, by the way. Similar for protections around bodily autonomy and Dobbs. We have those protections in New York State. We have these protections against discrimination in New York City. As you mentioned, they are the strongest, some of the strongest in the country, and they will remain some of the strongest in the country. We will not allow this attack on the LGBT community to cross the threshold of the state of New York and cross the threshold of New York City. It's not going to happen. We have seen in the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act that all people are to be protected from discrimination on the basis of race, sex, gender orientation, identity, religion, etc. And New York City and New York State is the beacon, and we're the pace setter for the rest of the country on that. That really does not overturn our city laws, it does not overturn our state laws, but I do think that it elevates our state's and our community's responsibility in the fight nationally. I think I've been hearing so much from people in different cities, in different states that do not have these kinds of protections, that are seriously considering relocating or seeking care here. Even if you don't relocate, there are people that may need access to things like hormone therapy or adoption services, family services, that may have to seek care in New York. And I think that we kind of Now we're kind of stepping up to the plate to make sure that we expand on those protections and help our neighbors in providing those protections as well. But we're right here for
This is the last question for tonight with Victor Pineda.
With the latest ruling on affirmative action with regards to college admissions by the Supreme Court, do you see the Fair College Admission Act as an answer to leveling out the playing field for all students? And following that, in instance, does the bill eliminate the admission advantage? In essence, does the bill eliminate all admission advantages?
Your first question is that I do support Jamal Bowman's bill that he co-authored with Senator Ed Markey to address the college admissions issue. I do support it. I am supportive. I think it would eliminate. I think it could help tackle a lot of these issues. Now, I can't say 100% because there's always going to be something, but I think it would go a long way in leveling out the playing field. I'm a proud co-sponsor of it. I mean, what is fair about being able to buy your kid access to some of the most prestigious universities in the country? Like, there's nothing fair about that. There's nothing just about that. What I love about all of this is that there are so many justices and members of Congress who themselves got into Ivy League universities because their parents and the privileges that they enjoy, and they're probably quaking in their boots right now because they want to be able to buy their own children's access to these own institutions, which I believe is also why you don't even see, is the Supreme Court majority even alluding to legacy admissions when 70% of legacy applications to Harvard are white students. But that's not considered, and that's not overturned, but affirmative action is. And so I'm a proud supporter of the bill. I do think it'll go a long way in leveling the playing field. But also, the answer to this is not just in demanding more access to this tiny sliver of institutions. We do want to do that. But I believe the answer is in tuition-free public colleges and universities for all. Per class at Harvard, right? And we need to make sure that every single person can achieve their potential and choose, tuition-free public college if they want to, but also trade school if they want to. There's so many other opportunities for higher education, not just four-year institutions, but also functional and trades work. We need so many trades, so badly. But we really need the trades so badly. And I also think that it's a big part of what the Bronx has to offer. We have so many wonderful building trades folks here, so many union folks that work here, and so many apprenticeships, union track apprenticeship programs. It's so strong here, and you can actually make that living that supports people on trades as well. And I think that they need to be kind of heralded on an equal level as well as liberal arts education. There's nothing, I don't think it should even be an either or thing, right? It's like this idea that, plumbers should study poetry. That's false, right? And I think a robust education allows people the opportunity to pursue whatever it is that they want to pursue. Thank you. We'll see if we can catch you all after, but Eva, take it away.
Thank you everyone for joining tonight, and thank you to Ray Arroyo and his team for hosting us tonight. Congresswoman, please come online here in the middle. My colleagues will do the photos. And if Francis would like to participate in a gaggle, please come online on my right here. And my colleagues will. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming in.
Alright, like I said, I'll be available.
I have to the moment, but I might just be off it.